Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's kickoff keynote following that great overview of what the West Coast is doing with Minister Bruce Ralston in British Columbia. We're kicking off today with a real treat for us, our keynote speaker, Rick Leary, who's the CEO of the Toronto Transit Commission. And just as a bit of background, for those of you not from Toronto, we're from Canada. TTC is one of the largest systems in North America. It's certainly the largest system in Canada. It's also among the most innovative, certainly in the world, in terms of what is happening under the leadership of Rick Leary right now. The TTC itself has an annual operating budget of $2.15 billion for conventional and wheel trans services. And Rick is also responsible for a 10-year capital budget that's over $11 billion. $2 billion is actually more dollars than some provinces in Canada. So it's a massive budget for the leader of a transit system to be managing right now. Just by way of intro, as I bring Rick on screen digitally here with us, Rick, you've got a really great history. It's a really organic history, having started as a subway train attendant and then working your way through the system all the way up to Chief Operating Officer at Massachusetts Bay Transit Authority, and now, of course, as CEO of TTC. We're delighted to have you here today, but we're also really lucky as Canadians to have you leading one of the largest transformations of the largest transit system in this country. So welcome, Rick, to our global and national conference on low carbon smart mobility. And I'm going to turn the virtual microphone to you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to see you. Thank you for the kind words. One of my proudest moments, I'll let you know, is on the 13th of August, 2019, when I became a Canadian citizen. All right, but when people talk about where I come from, I like to know that I came here and I'm just honored to be a Canadian today myself. So thank you for that. So just good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Again, my name is Rick Leary, and I'm the CEO of the Toronto Transit Commission, better known as the TTC and the GTHA here. As we all know, the past 15 months really have been a challenge for public transit agencies around the world. The TTC is certainly no exception here, but I think we can all agree, I think things are starting to look up. I think that light at the end of the tunnel is starting to get a little brighter, and there are good things that are going to happen ahead of us. Here in Toronto, the economy is beginning to reopen. We see people returning to the city, going back to work a little bit, making more discretionary trips, and that means more people on public transit. So today I'm going to speak a little bit about things that we've been doing here at the TTC, not only to welcome our customers back to our system, but to ensure when they come back to the system, they notice a difference, that they see an improved system. I want to highlight some of our accomplishments that we have and our opportunities and our plans, all with the goal of continuing the modernization of the TTC to make it a better organization for this great city. One of the ways that we're doing this is through our investments, and we're looking at sustainable and smart technologies. As the largest transit system in Canada and the third largest transit system in North America, the TTC operates an extensive and integrated multimodal system that carries 85% of all transit trips in the Greater Toronto area. We are the real key connector for people that need to go to leisure, services, and employment across the region. And I'd let you know that the real true workhorse of our system is our bus network. Many of our customers rely on our buses to get them where they need to go, and this has been especially true and never more true than during the course of this pandemic. So when we decided to take a look at the TTC to see what can we do to do our part to reduce carbon emissions, improve air quality, and build greener future for Toronto, our bus network was the logical place to look at and start with first. Now, this initiative actually began in November of 2017 when the TTC Green Bus Technology Plan was first introduced to our board. In part of our 5-year corporate plan, it was the 2018 to 2022 corporate plan, we set out purposely the intention to modernize our service, innovate for the long term, and mitigate climate change. The first step for the TTC was, as everybody moved to clean diesel, but then was to move to the hybrid vehicles, a technology that had been widely tested to a greater degree than the all-electric bus. And shortly after that, though, I'd tell you, we began adding battery electric buses to our fleet. In June of 2019, we put our first all-electric bus on the road on our 35 Jane bus route. And today, we have 60 zero-emission buses on the streets of Toronto. We've committed to having at least 50% of a zero-emission fleet in roughly the next 10 years, with the promise of 100% zero emissions free fleet by 2040. A similar promise that most of us in the industry are talking about. And it's an ambitious goal, but I think it's one that we can meet. Right now, as you can see on the slide, I should say next slide, please. Thank you. Right now, as you can see on the slide, we're well underway with our green bus program. But before we get into anything, I want to talk about the infrastructure and the complete business transformation. I just want to show you the vehicles that we have. So next slide, please. So these 60 buses are from 3 different manufacturers. And as many of you are well aware, we have been monitoring their performance in a head-to-head comparison program. And this is an example of our commitment to innovation and sustainability that makes the TTC a leader in the industry by operating the largest fleet of battery electric buses in North America. And of course, what I believe is what's good for our environment is also good for our economy. And we're realizing this just in the fuel savings alone. I'd let you know that since 2017, we have seen nearly a 30% reduction in fuel usage. We're using 20 million liters less a year than we were just a few years ago. And when we become an entirely fossil fuel less fleet, we'll be saving up to $80 million a year when we go to electrification. It's going to be fabulous for us. And that's a big number, and that's a big difference in the reduction in fossil fuels. It just starts out, for us in how we're reducing our greenhouse gases, improving the quality of air for this city, and using innovation as a responsible steward of public purse. By 2025, we expect to have approximately 300 more long-range battery electric buses in our fleet. By 2030, we'll need to order an additional 1,600 more eco-friendly vehicles to support our customer base. We are pleased to lead the charge towards full electrification and help pave the way for other cities and agencies to advance their green bus program. And we know we can't accomplish this ambitious plan to fully electrify our fleet by 2040 on our own. The green bus program will continue to need a reliable electricity supply and charging infrastructure, both at our bus garages and at certain TTC stations. So that's why I would tell you, we are extremely excited to work with our partners at Ontario Power Generation and Toronto Hydro on leading edge green infrastructure to support the full electrification of our fleet. Now, this partnership between a public agency, a municipally owned company, and a business corporation is a first for us. It's also an area of significant innovation where the TTC is taking the lead role in advancing industry best practices. With this program underway, I am confident to say that we are on our way to modernizing our service, innovating for the long term, and mitigating climate change in a fiscally responsible way. Next slide, please. Now speaking of modernization in buses, I also want to mention a project that we've recently initiated on our bus work, and we're really excited about this one as well. It's our Wi-Fi. On May 31st, we launched the first phase of a 6-month pilot project to provide free Wi-Fi on our bus network, starting with 2 of our busiest routes that serve areas that are identified where the City of Toronto intends to put additional municipal investment into these areas. The initiative is part of a City of Toronto program aimed at prioritizing and providing Wi-Fi access to neighborhood improvement areas within the city. It's a great program. Now, this first phase will allow us to evaluate a variety of Wi-Fi services, service models, as well as gather feedback. And I can let you know we're getting some significant feedback from our customers right now, and we're really excited about this. What we're doing is we're learning from this pilot, and it'll help inform us as we put together a request for proposal for a fully managed customer Wi-Fi network for our buses and streetcar fleet, which we'll put out later on this year. While the best network is the major focus for us, we're also focused on expanding and improving transit across the entire network. To that end, I was really thrilled, I can tell you, that last month, the board's decision and our council's decision to approve 60 more accessible zero-emission streetcars. Next slide, please. Investment in public transit, I'm going to say transit specifically, is critical to local and national economies as we begin to put this pandemic behind us and welcome our customers back to our system. With the funding commitments that were announced last month by the federal, provincial, and city partners, we now have the ability to provide a reliable and accessible service for decades to come. You know, in addition, streetcar service on a number of those routes was and is currently supported by 50 buses to provide that service. So I'd let you know that this $568 million investment allows us to reallocate those vehicles back to the bus network where they are and will be deeply needed. This means that we'll give a better ability to reduce gridlock along these key traffic routes, increase our capacity and reduce our wait times, while also providing a faster, frequent, and environmentally friendly TTC service. I'll let you know that these new streetcars, as excited as we are, they'll be here beginning in late 2023 through the early parts of 2025. And it's one thing to increase the number of streetcars and buses on our streets, but it's just as important to realize we need this as this city continues to grow. But I also say, and I remind people, it's not enough. We have to continue learning and keeping to innovating. Next slide, please. You know, as the city and traffic congestion continues to grow in Toronto, we want people to choose public transit. For that to happen, we need to ensure that our systems are reliable and that we're continuing to transform and modernize the business. So we're exploring creative and innovative solutions to make that happen. One way we're doing this is with the automatic transit pilot project that we're working on with the City of Toronto and Metrolinx. This is intended to test the feasibility of being used, test the feasibility of the technology being used to meet otherwise unmet transit needs, such as filling the demand for the first and last mile gaps, and looking at how people get to transit stations or to their routes from their homes or their workplaces without having to depend on using a car. The pilot will connect residents from our West Rouge neighborhood to the transit options at Rouge Hill GO station. I can tell you to let you know that we're going to this automated vehicle will use a human attendant on board at all times. So it's an exciting project for us, and as well as those partners within the city and the province. The project is expected to get underway later this year in mixed traffic, mind you, and will be critical to demonstrating the future opportunities for convenient, green, and accessible transit technology. You know, another interesting option that we're looking at is we're exploring is platooning automated buses. A tightly grouped convoy of buses would be connected through a virtual coupler comprised of sensors and cameras and wireless tetherings, and respond to the lead driver's directions, that being turning, stopping, and accelerating as directed. I want to be clear that this is something we're just looking at right now, and we're still exploring and trying to determine its feasibility. But we need to look at these kind of significant changes to innovate and modernize for our customers. If we can make platooning a reality in the future, there's huge benefits to this city. But sometimes the solutions that we can make happen quickly are really what make the greatest impact to our customers today. I'd let you know that that's why we partnered with the city, and when it came to Rapid TO, a program that started last October in Scarborough along our Eglinton and Kingston and Morningside corridor, which actually became Bus Rapidway between our far eastern station at Kennedy and allowed a bus Rapidway all the way to the University of Toronto. It was what our bus customers were asking for, and it's what we delivered. And it's those kinds of changes that we're able to bring about quickly to provide alternatives for heavy ridership corridors that they see us thinking ahead, being mindful of the public purse, and creating reliable solutions for our customers. Next slide, please. You know, again, as Canada's largest transit agency, or transit system, we know that many of the projects and initiatives that we undertake can help other transit agencies as well. Every transit system in the world right now is moving towards a greener, more sustainable future. We've seen how positive adopting green technology and zero emission vehicles has been for our organization. And because of the size of the TTC, and by being a large scale early adopter, we're helping to drive the prices down, increase availability of parts and maintenance, and work out the technological kinks for other transit systems. We're putting a specific focus on this with a joint procurement strategy in mind as we become the early adopter. We're also changing our own traditionally closed procurement process and sharing our learnings and next steps quickly and publicly, something we've already started to do with the e-bus program. We recently shared the initial results of our head-to-head comparison of electric buses and have partnered with the National Research Council of Canada to further analyze these results and get a third-party, unbiased input. In addition, one of the TTC's lead engineers leads a committee of 29 agencies across Canada and the United States who regularly meet to share information, discuss the challenges, and come up with solutions. And these conversations allow other transit agencies to anticipate upcoming issues and mitigate where possible. By serving as a resource for agencies across Canada and internationally, we're using our size and our influence to support positive change in our industry. But I'd also say, would let it be known that we learn too. We learn as well working with others, and we're very appreciative of that. And the example I will give you is we recently procured 110 new Wheel-Trans vehicles, our paratransit vehicles, as a joint procurement with Metrolinx. They're going to start arriving later this year, and it'll bring tangible benefits to modernization and more comfortable and convenient service to our Wheel-Trans customers. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to wrap up by spending a little time talking about how the TTC is preparing to welcome back our customers as the pandemic winds down. It will come as no surprise to anyone that the COVID-19 pandemic has continued to dramatically impact ridership here in Toronto. Now, last September, the TTC had a high point of ridership return where we were carrying roughly 650,000 customers a day across all modes of the TTC, but 53% of that was taking place on our best network. We had a low period as well during the pandemic. We were at about 350,000 passenger trips a day. Now, I remind the board, although historically we're in the 1.7 million passenger trips a day realm, that even at our lows, right, we equated to still the 7th largest transit system in North America. So there's an impact there that we still had on this service. I'd let you know that thanks to the unwavering commitment of our frontline operators, maintenance staff, office and clerical workers, the TTC has been able to play a pivotal role in providing the vital transit services to our essential workers and those communities that are solely transit dependent. This really was a case of essential workers moving essential workers. We're hopeful, of course, that with the recent increase in vaccinations, that this will lead to putting the pandemic behind us. But in the meantime, while we were addressing the pandemic, the TTC was using this period of time with low ridership to make significant progress on its state of good repair work and to continue moving forward on its important capital investment projects, ones that will really make a difference for our customers. And I believe they'll see that when they return. In March, we opened up a new state-of-the-art environmentally conscious bus facility in the northeast end of our city, our McNichol Bus Garage. It has the largest green roof in Toronto and one of the largest in all of Canada. Most importantly, it means better service for our customers in that area of the city. Now, in May, we completed our third 10-day closure on a portion of Line 1, our busiest subway line. And it was our fifth 10-day closure that we've completed in the last 6 months. By implementing these extended closures, specifically the 3 that we had in the most core of the downtown, we were able to eliminate 75 to 100 planned weekend closures, and as well the need to bypass certain stations for an up to 2-year period of time. We were able to accomplish 18 months worth of work in 30 days. And I think that everyone agreed that this was good news for the city and for our customers. Next slide, please. It also lets you know that we surveyed and did a number of surveys during the course of that time. And our customers were very supportive of this approach. We provided a very good bus service in the interim, but we made sure we communicated to them what we were doing and why. And we really appreciated their patience and understanding. Next slide, please. We also know safety will continue to be a big part for concerns of people as more of them return to transit And we've been working hard to ensure that our customers feel that this transit system is safe. Like others, we've increased and enhanced our cleaning and sanitization across the system by disinfecting and cleaning all of our stations, our buses, our streetcars, our trains, and our wheel-trans vehicles multiple times a day. We really put a real focus on common touch points and grab points, such as buttons and railings and handles and straps, like many of us have in the industry. We've also given away masks. We've given over 2 million masks away, as well as installing sanitizing dispensers at all of our stations. And we're working hard to deploy our service today where we know it is most needed. And we pledge to continuing doing this while also exploring new ways to keep the City of Toronto, our employees, and our customers safe. Next slide, please. Now, as we look to the future, we know that we can't always predict what lies ahead of us. But what I do know is that public transit must continue to evolve. At the TTC, we are committed to modernizing our service, innovating for the long term, and mitigating climate change. All while, I would say, providing a safe and reliable experience for our customers and our employees. So we look forward to continuing this work and transforming both our culture and our fleet now and into the future. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you for your time and attention this afternoon. I look forward to everyone being welcome back to riding the TTC and coming to the City of Toronto. I'm happy to take any questions you may have. So thank you for today.
Thank you so much, Rick. And we have a lot of questions. I will tell you, not just as an avid TTC rider myself, but it is my lifeline, and it's the lifeline for a lot of people who live and work in Toronto. So thank you for your hard service. Now, I'm going to segue right into the questions, but give you a little story. It's a little bit, not to put you ill at ease, but I think you recognize, large corporations takes a lot of inertia to change, right? It takes a lot of effort for change management. And back in 2016, when we started our electric bus project, it was a different time, a different era, and we did have like a lineup of TTC folks there who, their view was it's not happening, not happening, not gonna. And I remember one person like sitting in the front like this, it's not happening, not gonna happen. We went through this with hybrids, it's very bad, and so we moved forward with Brampton and TransLink and so on. And in 2017, after about a year and a half of like getting agencies to go forward, but TTC wasn't part of the project. I found myself on a stage with Andy Byford. And for about a year and a half, I was like, I'm going to get to Andy. And if I explain to this guy what we're doing, he's going to understand that it's really important. So we were on a stage together and, I explained the project. And in front of like 500 people, Andy says to me, Yossi, but like, why is TTC not leading this? And I said to him, Andy, I don't know, you should be. And so I thought, finally, I got to him. But then like a month and a half later, he left TTC. And I was like, no, right? So we had to start all that square one again. But I was delighted to see when you came in, just a huge push forward, not just on electrification, but innovation like Wi-Fi. So bravo, because it's electrified, it's connected, it's shared, and it's now automated in part. And that hits all the cornerstones of critical innovation in transit. So that segues to our first question for you. We've long advocated for transit as an economic innovator. It should be the place where innovation happens, even though it's risky. Can you take us through how you see the TTC as the lifeline of economic development, economic growth, and innovation in not just the Toronto area, but I believe nationally?
No, that's a great question. Thank you for that. I want to start out by saying I remember those meetings when you came on our property, right, early on at that time, right, and you were trying to sell it to people. And the TTC, it had a mindset at the time, right? It's a big organization as well, right? And they puts out 15 to 1,600 buses a day, and you can't do anything that would jeopardize that because you jeopardize the service, right? But I appreciate you keep coming back and working with us and bringing us in with the other transit partners, because it kind of brought some excitement back into the organization, and then it became very competitive, and they wanted to go, right? And when this place runs, it runs. So thank you for that. A lot of credit to your organization as well as the other transit systems, right, for keeping us part of that loop and helping us all move and learn. Well, I look at transit as a whole, and I say to myself, as important as the TTC was pre-pandemic, I think it's just going to be just as important post-pandemic. We look at the importance of what's going on at this city. This is a city where people want to come to, want to live, want to work, and want to play. 75,000 people a year move to the City of Toronto, right? The greatest means of moving around the city is going to be on public transportation. We can no longer look at what happens when we talk about gridlock. It's about eliminating gridlock. It's about time. It's about quality of life. We know that is so important to people today. It's about access as well. Whether you have the means or ability to have a car or you personally choose not to, it's about access of movement around this city. And the city has so much to offer, and it probably gives you the opportunity to get there. You know, I look at that recent, the CD Howe Institute released a report in April, right? And it was really, there was a wow factor there when it talked about the TTC enables a $2.7 billion and annual wider economic benefits. That is huge to this region, right? And it's recognized, they're going to say internationally, about the impact on world-class cities having world-class transit. You know, when you talk about the concept of the clean economy, you know, we look at, okay, so I mentioned it in my presentation, talking about, you know, reducing greenhouse gases, reducing fossil fuel consumption. But we look at that, you know, in this city about having cleaner air leading to better health. So there are so many benefits with the continued investment in public transit. But I do want to touch a moment on the equity aspect of it, because it's something that's become very important to this organization, all right, in the last few years. And it's something we're not going to drop the ball on. And that's the equity aspect of people taking public transit. You know, when I often tell people from outside of Toronto and outside of Canada that 51% of the people that live in the city of Toronto weren't even born in Canada. This is a very, very diverse community. And when you talk about wanting people to take public transit, you need to make sure that your organization is welcoming to people, comfortable for people, and safe for people. That hasn't always been true, right? And that's what with the conversations that we're having today. We're having a heavy emphasis on diversity and inclusion in this organization, right? Making sure we give proper training and making people aware and be knowledgeable of that aspect of this business, because we are a customer service business. As big as important we are as the economy in the region, right? We're a customer service business to each individual, and they have to feel safe and comfortable here. You know, we've been having a heavy emphasis in unconscious bias and confirmation bias in this company, and going out and speaking with the communities and making them understand we are the community and we want to work with people. So there's so much benefit for public transit in this city. I find it amazing, and we have a lot of investment and a long way to go, but we're getting there, and it's for the greater good.
Rick, that's fantastic. I mean, I will give you like a little story and segue into the next question. Diversity is really important. We speak that language, but what does that actually mean? When I was in Mexico about a year and a half ago for a transit conference, the women told me there, look, we don't take transit because we get raped. Like that's what happens on our transit system. And I remember coming back and I was at a conference and I said, you know, sexual violence is an issue also on our systems. We know that there's racial violence. We know that there's issues on our transit systems, and safety is critical. And I did have one person say to me, a senior leader, you know, we would never have rape on our transit systems. I said, are you sure? Have you talked to women? Because I've been groped on our systems. And these are fundamental issues. So I'm really happy to hear that it is forefront and is key and center. But I'm going to take it out of kind of the diversity element and now talk about money, because I really do think money motivates people, motivates systems. Zero emissions buses are more expensive up front from a capital perspective. The operations are new. The charging systems, whether depot or en route, are new. And, you know, based on our own modeling, it's probably likely that there's going to be some hydrogen fuel cell buses in the mix as well. So it's a lot of new capital investments up front. How do you foresee overall that cost coming down, and to what extent, as you alluded, do joint procurements play a critical role that TTC can lead in getting the price point down?
No, fabulous. I'll start on the big picture, though. I think that what we've seen during this pandemic, and with all the ridership loss, which means revenue loss to all of our organizations, is the higher orders of government, both the provincial and the federal government, specifically outlined funding for public transit, recognizing its importance to the economy and people. Right. So we know that those level of governments recognize that. I'll bring you back to 2019 when the TTC introduced its first capital investment plan to the board and council, because it really was about making sure that they were aware of what the needs are for the organization for long-term planning. And we shared this document with other levels of government as well, because they have to know what they have to prepare for. Our role and our obligation as public servants is make sure that they're educated so they can plan and make arrangements for that. You know, when you look at the history of the TTC and the history of vehicle procurements, for instance, and even more recently with some of the infrastructure money that's been given to us, we know that when the city steps up and puts its portion of funding together to identify its needs, that the other levels of governments come in as well. You know, for us, that's an important aspect of educating everybody on our needs. You know, you bring it to more locally, and as I talked about it earlier, working with Toronto Hydro and OPG, incredible partners. It's carrying the message. It's like working with your organization, carrying the message and educating people on the importance of what we're doing, the impact it has on everyone personally. Okay, so that is working very nicely with us. And so more and more, and you may not be aware, but we focus really closely with the GTHA as we talk about service integration and how we can do more together. And so we've been focusing as organizations that way, right? To make sure that together, we can make these differences when it comes to procurement in the future, working with the Ontario Public Transit Association, having them lead for us with you and with the others, with the knowledge and the background of what the TTC has and some of the lessons learned from other transit systems and the technologies they're testing. It's all about the greater good. And the more that we talk about this, the more I see other levels of government wanting to fund these type of programs. We hear about it at their level, the federal level, and more particular, talking about electrification of bus fleets in Canada. So, it's carrying that message and getting it out there. And if history repeats itself, funding will come. I know that the city of Toronto has put $4.7 billion of its matching money up now, right, for streetcars and subway trains and buses, right? And now it's for us to get the message out there.
Rick, you couldn't be more right. I mean, when we lobby for money for transit agencies, the first thing we are asked by ministers is essentially what's the city putting forward and what's the province putting forward. So it's kind of chicken and egg a little bit, but TTC is most certainly being led by an innovative city. Now, we have taken you a minute over time. I do want to squeeze in one last question if you have 3 more minutes to grant us.
Sure.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thanks so much. So building on what you just said, it is a leader. TTC is pushing forward a joint procurement. It is going to change the national landscape for cost price points. But part of the answer too is that regional integration of infrastructure. And for years we have heard it's really hard to share infrastructure, like a charging station over here. How could York Region and TTC co-share it? And we've heard it across the country too. But the reality is the future may well be shared infrastructure in the sense of some en route chargers that are not fully deployed might be co-utilized by different agencies, Metrolinks thrown in there. And we could also envision a day where hydrogen fueling and charging systems that are low usage overnight are sold or rented out to delivery fleets because it's the same standards, it's the same systems, it's the same fueling mechanism. So possibly an opportunity for infrastructure sharing, not just across the GTHA transit agencies with Metrolinks, but also with the private sector in terms of renting out space. Could you walk us through what thoughts you have about that future, given its complexity?
I really think it's about the partnerships and collaboration that's already been started in the GTHA, to be honest with you. I think we're all realizing we're on a journey. The TTC is looking at, electrifying its bus fleet and then moving to its wheel trans fleet and then its non-revenue fleet. We're in discussions with the rest of the GTHA, the transit systems, talking about how we can better integrate our services, sharing routes, sharing stations. And ultimately, as you're aware, when we talk about the electrification of fleets, it's how do we do this together, right? Because we are one GTHA. We really have a great partnership with the OPG, right? And they are kind of the link for all of us, right? As we move forward to the electrification. And I say that because as you start talking to all the transit systems doing this, and you talk about the journey, then you start saying, who else are we bringing in and who else are we partnering with and talking to, right? When we talk about private business and universities, bringing others in, I do look at this, it's going to take a broader perspective in the big picture, but it's going to be a journey. And I think that the more confident people have with the technology, the faster it's going to grow. So, it's again, we're all together, we're all having discussions. I can't tell you how long it's going to take before we get the private carriers as part of, but our intentions, the intentions of the GTH transit systems is to share what we have, right? And make it a best practice for the greater good of everyone in this area.
Thank you so much, Rick. And I just want to conclude, we've come up to the end of time, but what you've highlighted here is TTC is a leader and champion in innovation. It's taking on technology risk. It sees itself as an economic hub leader, and you're clearly building an ecosystem of R&D with universities and utilities and private sector, as well as our own consortium. We thank you for that. It is critical. I fundamentally believe transit is not just about serving the poorest communities, it's about serving our entire community to make sure that this nation is prepared for the 21st century. So thank you, Rick, for your leadership. Thank you to the TTC team for all of the innovative work that it's doing and the risk-taking. It will transform this landscape.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Good seeing you today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.